The next one is Councillor Cannon. Your motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Before I start, I would just like to point out a typo, which is my fault, not officers. In the last sentence, it should be July 2020. Since the Environment Agency took responsibility for managing the Thames and alleviating its floodwaters, it has ceased the river dredging that has been taking place for the previous 50 years. It's believed by many river users and riverside residents and people in the floodplains that are affected by the flooding, this has caused a decrease in capacity due to the unmanaged silting up, impacting on river navigation and the river's capacity to contain floodwaters. For simpleness and time, because we're late in this evening, I will just say this council requests that the Environment Agency resumes dredging of the River Thames within the boundaries of RBWM, especially the undefended reaches between Black Pots and Bells Weir, my ward, and Councillor Larcombe's ward, to alleviate the flood risk to our riverside communities and improve navigation, of course. We also request that the Environment Agency expedites its efforts in working with us in bringing forward its alternative plans for flood alleviation for the Datchet to Bells Weir reach of the River Thames, following the EA's removal of the Channel 1 from the River Thames scheme in July 2020. Very simple. This was meant to come to a meeting a while ago, but due to circumstances, the meeting was cancelled. However, the publicity around this has already made it a success. The Environment Agency have already committed to consider dredging as part of their schemes for the undefended reach, and we're going through the processes at the moment. And also, we need, as a council, to support our residents, need to support the second part of the motion, to then expedite their efforts in getting a flood alleviation scheme to protect the residents, Datchet, Horton, Wraysbury, and Old Windsor. I would commend this.
Seconder, please. Councillor. Would you like to speak now, Councillor Coppinger, or would you? Right, okay.
I have been a councillor for a number of years now, and the subject of the River Thames, especially in that end of the borough, has been on our list of things that need doing at all times. I am absolutely delighted that Councillor Cannon has achieved so much that has got the Environment Agency to do what is their basic duty, which they have been very lax in doing. And I'm proud to second this motion, which will bring the security to the residents that are desperate for it. It is a really good motion. Thank you.
Now I'm opening this up to the rest of the council. Right, the first one is Councillor Larcombe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have had a bit of experience of flooding in Wraysbury, that long lost outpost. After the Jubilee River was built, at a cost of something like £100 million, not to this council, of course. All the floodwater was diverted and it ended up in Datchet, Horton and Wraysbury, the undefended parishes further downstream. Not just in 2003, but twice in 2014 and nearly again on many other occasions. The rules changed in 2010 with the Floods and Water Management Act that gave this council some powers. And it also introduced a thing called partnership funding, where new schemes needed input from businesses and councils. This council, I think, agreed to put money into the River Thames scheme back in maybe, well, 2014 or 2015, and there was no argument. But when it came to the crunch and the Environment Agency wanted £53 million as part of their £650 million scheme, somebody here said no. Or they may not be here now, they may be elsewhere. But they said no. But that's not the whole truth. The whole truth is that whoever was involved, and I do have the paperwork from the time, did not tell, I believe, this whole council how much money was needed. So as time went on, neither this council knew, nor the parishioners downstream knew about the £53 million. So we get to 2019 election, and the claim was that this council was putting in £10 million towards flood alleviation in Datchet, Horton and Wraysbury, when the true amount was £53 million. So there's lots of mumbling in the background in amongst a sponsorship group that I was never invited to back in 2019 when I could have been. And nobody said a word to me, even though I was on the Regional Flood and Coastal Committee. And I started asking questions about the funding. All of a sudden, I lost my seat on the Regional Flood and Coastal Committee. So I lost my contact. But even they didn't tell me. David Bedlington, the project manager, didn't tell me. Nobody told me. Until my fellow councillor attended a meeting at the end of July 2020 and said, oops, River Thames scheme, Channel 1 has been removed. So I've got all the minutes. That removal was the final removal, the sort of last possible time. They were talking about lack of funding in minutes going back 2 years or 3 years prior to that. And nobody said a word. So here we are today, coming up to winter. Datchet, Horton, Wraysbury at risk of flooding yet again. But I have no doubt that this council will send them loads of sandbags like they did last time. You really haven't got a clue about what you've done. And that will come forth at the next election when I tell the people the truth. Please remember that if I'm back here in 9 months' time. And if the place floods between now and then, that's also a problem, because this council has not looked after the ordinary water courses that it is responsible for. So here we have today, we're asking for the Environment Agency to dredge the River Thames. They have no duty to dredge the River Thames. They have a duty to maintain the navigational channel in the mainstream. They have no duty to dredge any of the rest of it. And it is suffering from bed rise flooding. That went beep, did it? Okay. It needs an increase in conveyance capacity, I have no doubt, but good luck to you trying to demolish Staines Bridge. That should be quite fun. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
Yes.
Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hill.
Just agreeing with Ewan's point, it's not just about River Thames. It really is about all the riparian ways that come off the River Thames and the small water courses that come off the River Thames. because these are completely full. You've only got to take a walk. Well, everybody knows where I live, down in Riverside. You've only got to take a walk round there and you see these things are full of trees and bushes and silt, and they haven't been cleared for decades. And so when the Thames rises, it's got nowhere to go. It always used to have somewhere to go, so it used to spread out across, well, Riverside and the rest of the borough. Now it just keeps going up. In terms of dredging the River Thames, well, we've got a Jubilee flood relief scheme that works brilliantly. But what we haven't got that works brilliantly is keeping these small water courses clear and these little riparian ways clear. So I'm going to suggest to Councillor Cannon that if he's going to put pressure on the Environment Agency, he puts pressure on them there. Because when I had that responsibility, they weren't responding very well. But I'm sure that it's their responsibility to maintain some or all of those water courses. We'll have to ask the officers whose responsibility it is. But that's one of the key reasons we get flooding in the floodplain. It's not all about the River Thames, because the River Thames is about a mile wide under the ground and it comes up and fills up all these water courses, and there's nowhere for the water to go. Flood relief channel's working brilliantly where we are. Obviously, we need another one. So something to think about, Councillor Cannon.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Councillor Cannon has had ample opportunity with his public protection portfolio to address this issue of dredging with the EA. The failure of the Conservative administration to keep their promises to residents of Raisby, Old Windsor and Datchet that they would support the River Thames scheme cannot be solved with what amounts to a sticking plaster. Perhaps he needs to put more effort into how he intends to raise the millions of pounds needed to do the job properly and stop with the motion and that tinkering around the edges of a very serious problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wants to speak? Councillor Cannon.
Thank you very much for the history lesson and the armchair experts on flooding. The Environment Agency is responsible for the River Thames, and this is what we're talking about here. I take your point. The small water courses are mainly responsibility of the riparian owners, unless they're governed by the lead local flood authority, which is the borough. But as I'm sure all these clogged up courses, you've reported them, I hope, so that they know how to deal with them, or they need to be dealt with. I've heard nobody speak against this motion. So thank you very much. I hope we'll have the support of the council to put pressure on the Environment Agency to tell them and our residents that we are serious in preventing them and those of us that live on the floodplain at risk of flooding, including myself. So I will just, hopefully you will support this motion. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Can this be agreed?